What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all doing well. And today we're going to be talking about the 4-part animated Marvel Disney Plus series that is a spin-off of one of the episodes of season 1 of Marvel's What If. And this series is called Marvel Zombies. Coming from the mind of Zeb Wells and Bryan Andrews, this show stars a bunch of returning cast members from the MCU like Iman Vellani, Dominique Thorne, Hailee Steinfeld, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, Simu, Elizabeth Olsen, Paul Rudd, and more. So here we are a few years after the release of the first season of What If. What If has now come to a close as a series altogether, but one of the most iconic episodes that got people really excited about season 1, especially when they were dropping trailers and letting us know what we were going to see, was Marvel Zombies. And if you guys are familiar with that comic line or just that world, you know that it's just a cool what if storyline. It's just something that's interesting. And I remember being a kid and just loving those comics and just being so into it. So when I saw they were going to do a what if episode, I was so excited, and I always hoped that they would do more with that concept. I think it was one of the most beloved episodes of What If, without a doubt. And the Marvel Zombies idea has always been something that's really enjoyed by most fans. So here we are now talking about a 4-episode mini-series that plays off of that What If episode. You don't really need to have seen that What If episode to completely understand what's going on here. But if you have, it does help because it plays within that exact same What If scenario. And so, yeah, I was really happy to check this out. I am a little bit behind. I would have had this review up a lot sooner. I'm typically pretty quick when it comes down to Marvel-related stuff, but due to my work schedule, some life, as well as attending Halloween Horror Nights with my wife last night, I did not have the time, but I just sat down to binge all 4 episodes. I have my thoughts right now. This is going to be a spoiler-free review, so before we get into my thoughts, let's talk about what this series is all about. In an alternate universe born from the What If zombie story, Earth is overrun by a zombie plague that infects many heroes and villains alike. The series follows a band of survivors as they journey across the post-apocalyptic world to uncover the origin of the outbreak and find a way to reverse or contain it. Among them, Scarlet Witch as the zombie queen and powerful undead forces pose existential threats, and the show is a blend of horror and superhero action that's a darker spin on the MCU. And I'm happy to start this off by saying I had a lot of fun with this series. I thought it was a really cool time. I do have some gripes. There are some elements about this that I wish had been handled a little bit better, I won't lie, but in general, as far as just like a fun what if storyline that isn't really consequential to the big overarching MCU plot, and you can just have fun throwing a bunch of characters in a big crazy zombie action 4-episode series, I thought it was a lot of fun to watch. I also really appreciated that they continue to develop that what if style of animation. I feel like with every season the animation got crisper, things looked nicer, and this is no different, with Marvel Zombies being just really cool to look at, especially once things are really colorful and vibrant and there's a lot of badass action in it. So there was a lot about this series I really enjoyed, and on the visual front in terms of animation, that was one of those big elements, especially when you have cool ideas like having big Marvel characters be zombies who are now using their abilities as zombies. That's just a concept in general that just feels like fan service. So to have an actually produced show from Marvel release on Disney Plus that has these concepts just allows for a lot of really fun visuals. And if you've seen What If and a lot of the other Marvel animated things, on Disney Plus, then you'll know that they bring a lot of the main cast who play these characters in live action to return. And one thing that surprised me about this series that I didn't know going in was that Miss Marvel is like the central character. And I think that's going to turn some people off, but I'm definitely in support of starting to integrate more of the characters that are in the newer stuff that haven't really had that time to cross over with one another. And we still want to see that in the live action stuff, but it's nice that Marvel Zombies was able to kind of have a mix match kind of group of characters of mostly newer characters. You have Miss Marvel in here, you have Shang-Chi in the mix, you have characters like David Harbour as the Red Guardian, you have Yelena in here as well, and all played by people like Iman Vellani and Florence Pugh, David Harbour like I already mentioned, and of course you have Paul Rudd in here as well as Scott Lang, and it just a mix of a bunch of iconic characters played by their specific roles. Elizabeth Olsen, of course, being one of the biggest ones, as she plays the big bad of this series, Scarlet Witch, as the queen of the zombies, which was visually really cool. There's a lot of really awesome moments around her character. So yeah, there are a couple of characters that they aren't able to get the big names, like you have Thorne here, who's not played by Chris Hemsworth. And one of the interesting ones, and probably one of the coolest ones in here, is you have Blade Knight, as they call him. It's essentially Blade, who's a mix of Moon Knight. He's got Khonshu embedded in him as well. And he's made to look like Mahershala Ali, though Mahershala Ali does not do the voice for the character here, which I thought was kind of interesting. This is the first official time that we're seeing Mahershala Ali's Blade, even though this is like a what-if scenario, and it's kind of like a crossover between him and Moon Knight. But this is technically the first time we're seeing his iteration of Blade, supposedly, in the MCU to any degree. So it is strange that they were able to, have his likeness, but not have him doing the voice. I'm sure he gave them the green light, or he signed, a contract that allowed them to do it. But yeah, that was an interesting and kind of strange concept, but he was a really cool part of the show. So in general, I think you have a really cool mix of characters here. Mostly new. I will say that is a gripe that I have to some degree. While there are a lot of big iconic Marvel characters like Captain America or Hawkeye, the Hulk, Thor, Spider-Man that are in this series, many of which who are zombies and some who aren't. I do wish that they had spent a little bit more time with some of those classic Avengers characters. Only because as somebody who grew up with the earlier iterations of Marvel Zombies, it's one of those things where, it was those OG characters that were kind of at the front of that. And they all have a moment to shine for sure, with some of them having some really badass moments here. But I do wish they had maybe explored or had some of them be more integral to the main group of characters we're following, where it did kind of feel like mainly they wanted the whole crew that we're following in this to mainly be newer characters from the last few years of Marvel productions. But that's not a huge gripe, but something that I did wish they had handled a little bit better. But yeah, in general, I thought Marvel Zombies was just a good fun time. It breezes by. It didn't take a long time to watch. Each episode is about, on average, 28 to about 38 minutes. Some of them vary, but yeah, with credits and the intro, if you cut that stuff out, you kind of usually have about 30 minutes of show, and a couple of them were a little bit less. And all in all, I found it to just be a really well animated series that just has fun with what it's going for, and it's also gory. They don't really kind of shy away from that. They also aren't precious about characters dying here. There are a lot of characters that were with you throughout the entirety of the 4 episodes who end up getting demolished at a certain point. And then there are some characters who are offed pretty early into their screen time, and it's usually pretty gory, and they never really hold back from that. So I'm glad that Marvel was down to release a project that has a lot of blood and guts and gore. And even though it's inconsequential to the main MCU timeline, you do have these iconic MCU characters being pretty badly decimated and being ripped apart, and I thought that was really cool. I'm glad that they made this series. It felt like something that was just like a fun fan fiction. With all that said, my biggest gripe would be how this series ended, because I think it's one of those things where, how do you stick the landing? And there's a big portion of this series that is kind of going towards one specific plot point, one goal that the characters are trying to go for, that ultimately kind of fizzles out by the time you get to the end of the 3rd episode. That kind of made the whole drive of what our characters are going for kind of pointless. And then the 4th episode does something completely different with a completely different kind of storyline to kind of wrap it all up. And then the final moments of the series kind of felt for me kind of like it just undid everything we've just seen in a way that wasn't really all that satisfying. So when I look at Marvel Zombies altogether, I think you have a really well-made show that's well voice acted and has a lot of fun, over-the-top MCU action, and does deliver on the Marvel Zombie side of things. But as far as the narrative, I do feel like at a certain point, it does feel aimless, and then the finale just feels big for the sake of being big, but doesn't necessarily have the most satisfying ending for the journey our characters had been going on. So yeah, that was probably my biggest gripe, as well as some of the humor in the series. I would say it was a little hit or miss for me. I can't really say I ever really laughed with a lot of the silliness in the show. I just kept wanting them to get back to the action, which thankfully was abundant, so it made it a really fun watch. And so all in all, I think Marvel Zombies is a series that's going to be very much worth a lot of people's time. I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it. If you're a longtime Marvel fan, if you like a fun what if concept, if you like zombies, there's a lot of fun to be had here, but I don't necessarily know that everybody's going to love the choice to have Miss Marvel as the central character, or that majority of the characters are newer characters. I don't think everybody's going to love the ending. I don't really think it's a satisfactory ending, and I do think that the humor is going to be very hit or miss for some people. But I think undeniably the action, the visuals of the show, and just the promise of a fan servicey Marvel Zombies is certainly going to have people really entertained with the 4 episodes. I honestly think this could have gone for 6 or 8 episodes. Maybe they'll give us a second season. I don't know. But, all in all, I really enjoyed myself with this show, though I wish the ending was a little bit better. So that's going to be my thoughts on Marvel Zombies. So leave some comments down below. Where do you agree with me? Where do you disagree with me? What would you have liked to have seen? Which characters do you think should have been at the center of the story? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.